My name is Robert Northridge, and I'm the Vice County Recorder for County Fermanagh, and I also happen to be the Chair of the Science and Data Committee of the Botanical Society. And the object of this short talk this morning is to relaunch the Rare Plant Project in Ireland, which didn't quite get off the ground last year due to COVID and various other things. So I think the most appropriate place to start is a quick reminder of what the project was about. And they're listed, tabulated here. It's one of the post-Atlas 2020 projects that was proposed. And the object of the project is to search for and hopefully find Irish red data book species which have not been seen since 2000. One side effect of this is that this project will take you to interesting habitats and places, and you never know what other interesting things you might find. The whole search is based on data on the BSBI's database. And there's a query which was sent to all VCRs, and this query lists the records of species to be searched for. The project is time limited, it's to last for 3 years, and of course it's voluntary. If you would like to take part, and you're not a Vice County Recorder, contact your Vice County Recorder and they will help you. Next. Now, for those, some of us took part in this project last year, and we felt that some aspects of it were a bit complicated. So for this year, we've made it simpler. And here are some of the ways in which we have simplified it. The query now gives records for the whole of the Vice County, and it doesn't break it up into 30 or 40 hectads, which have to be searched individually. That's a very good start, I think. The query only lists native species, which means that most of the casual weeds are excluded. And they're the species that you're not likely to find 40 years after they were first found. By definition, they are casuals. The query also lists only records which have monad or better resolution. For reasons going back to the 1990s, many of the records in the DDB are only at hectare level, and so they are very hard to start to use as a starting point to search for anything. So this new query only lists records at monad resolution or better. The query has changed its starting date from 1970 back 20 years, so there's a greater selection of species to be found. We also felt that the recording form, if you wish to use it, was overcomplicated, so that has been simplified. And last year, we wanted people to post off their forms to the Irish officer, but this year, we'd like the data to be entered via MapMate or whatever thing you use to enter data. Next. Now, here is what the query looks like when it comes up on your screen. And one bit of advice that I would say to everyone is, if you're going to be involved in this, do quite a bit of thinking before you set off. There's no point in setting off and spending a whole day searching for a species if you are most unlikely to find it. You want to find species that you're actually likely to find. So this is the query, and the first point is that the Vice County Recorder has to insert their Vice County. If you wish to go to another Vice County, you can always insert that, but I put in West Donegal there. You can change the date. You see there's an arrow going in from the left, from 1950 back to 1850 if you wish. We have selected native species, but you can widen that to anything you like by going down on the little down arrow. You can do aliens or lots of other choices. And the last thing, the precision, we have set it to monad, but you can change it to tetrad or hectad and other things due to the down arrow. So that's for the Vice County Recorders. Next. Now, when you press find the species or whatever, this is a screen like this that comes up. Now, my first bit of advice would be to sort by the species, which means click on the top of the column entitled Species. And that will bring up all the, in this case, Ligusticum, Scoticum, Scots lovage, all the records of that will be together. Having done that, scan down the species and think, what species am I likely to find? The first one that I've arrowed is lovage, which is a perennial. It grows along rocky cliffs. And if it was there last year, it's almost certainly there this year. The next one that I've arrowed down is yellow Bartzia, which comes and goes in bits of waste ground and quarries and things. So that is not such a good species to search for. Now, next point, it is not very obvious, but hidden behind the green little rectangle, there is often a comment which will tell you things like where exactly the species was, how much of it is there, was it in flower? So the comment, it can be very useful. Moving across the top of the screen, one of the important things is who recorded this red data book species. Now, I put an arrow down to Chris Preston, who has recorded Sparganium natans least burr reed. I suspect that Sparganium natans is one of the species that is greatly over-recorded on the database, and that a lot of the records actually, in fact, refer to Sparganium erectum, greater burr reed, growing in riverine habitats. But if Chris Preston, one of the experts on aquatic species in Britain, has found Sparganium natans, it's definitely worth looking for it because it was a correct identification. Move across to the column on sites. Now, if it just says a townland like Gort Atoll, that could be hundreds of hectares of fields and bogs and dear knows what. So that's not very helpful. But if it gives a river, then it has two banks, but you can walk down the river and you stand a chance of finding it. Lakes would be similar, that you can walk around the lake. Cliffs, any linear habitat is a good starting point. Next column, monads and other grid references. I'll say this again, but don't forget that GPSs did not come in until the 1990s, and that if the date is before the 1990s, the grid reference may have to be taken with a little pinch of salt because it was probably taken by estimated from a map. The date is important because is this species visible all the year round, or is it just can be identified when it's in flower during the month of June or something? So check the date and put together a package that will tell you what species you are likely to find. That is before you set out at all. Next. I said we had simplified the recording form, and here is part of the simplified version. We won't go into the details of it, but make sure that you get the species, the grid reference, and some comment on how much of this rare species there is. Those would be the minimum things to give. Date, grid reference, your name, and the species. Next. Now, I look back to some of the things that were found last year during this project. John Faulkner, myself and my wife Hannah went to Armagh to go to Slieve Gullion, in particular to search for parsley fern, which it said was growing on the cairn on the summit of the mountain, which was a very exact place to go and look for it. Now, we went to the cairn and did not find it, so that was a bit disappointing, but not surprising. The other species that we went to look for were goldenrod, that has a quite specific habitat, often growing on sort of rocky outcrops and things. And we went to several rocky outcrops, like the picture on the left, and there was goldenrod. The other species we went to look for was Wilson's filmy fern, which again, if you know what it is like, has a very specific habitat, growing on rocks, damp rocks, often usually north facing. So we did find Wilson's filmy fern, but excitingly, when we looked down one of the crevices where Wilson's filmy fern was growing at the top, at the very bottom, we could see Tunbridge filmy fern, and we had found a second site for the whole of County Armagh, which was an exciting thing to have done on that day. Next. Now to County Louth, Black Mountain, and Cleona Byrne and Kate Harrington went to look for Diphasiastrum alpinum. The date was 1973, when grid references had hardly come in at all. The grid reference was J01. The comment was the upper rim above the steep slope. Now, the upper rim above the steep slope was a very good starting point to find it. And right enough, they did find the Diphasiastrum, And when they had their GPS with them, they discovered that it was in J02, not in J01, as somebody had estimated from the map 50 years ago. Next. When you're out and about, you don't necessarily have to set off deliberately to find rare plants. Sometimes you just happen upon them, as happened in southeast Galway when Anya Dillon was out walking her dog. And she refound bird's nest orchid after 167 years. It was last seen at this site in 1855. That must be almost a record for a refinding of a plant. So one of the morals is be on the lookout for interesting plants wherever you are, whatever you're doing, not just on the Rare Plant Project. Next. So if you're interested in this project to go and find rare plants which haven't been seen for over 20 years, there's a link to the project on the BSBI website. The Irish officer will send details of the query to VCRs if they don't already have it. Others should contact their VCR or the Irish officer for a list of the target species in their vice county. And don't forget, the project will take you to interesting sites, and you never know what else you might find other than the target species. So I wish everyone good hunting this season and next. Thank you.